With me is Martha Maddox from Sumter County to talk to us about one of my favorite herbs, rosemary. Welcome, Martha.
Thanks, Julie. It's great to be here. And rosemary, I think, is one of my favorite, too.
It's delicious, it's aromatic, and it actually looks great growing in our yards, too. So what do we do with rosemary?
Well, rosemary, as you can see in this first slide, is a very hardy herb. It's a perennial, and we can have it as a shrub. So, you know, it's diverse. Or you can just grow it in your garden for your kitchen purposes, for your cooking. There's two different types of rosemary, the shrub, the upright, the creeping, and the prostrate. The rosemary has the pine-like leaves on it, and the flowers are about a ½ inch, and they're white, lavender, sometimes they're pink or blue, and it blooms primarily in May. But basically we use rosemary for cooking.
And what are some of the things, the dishes we can use rosemary with?
Well, we can use rosemary in chicken, we can use it in fish, poultry, lamb, beef, any of the meats. Now, when you get into fish, you need to really be very, very, very careful with the rosemary, because fish is a very light meat, and rosemary can overpower the meat because rosemary has a very piney, very strong flavor.
So something like dill might be a better choice for fish?
Yes. Would probably be a better flavor.
So I see you have a sample here. So how do I prepare? How do I fix this when I'm fixing food?
Well, the first thing you need to do is clip your rosemary and wash it. And then as you see, it has the little leaves here on it. You just take your thumb and your forefingers and you put it on your stalk of rosemary and just start stripping. And then you have your rosemary.
Do I chop it up after I strip it?
Yes. Then you can take and pinch off the loose ends at the bottom. Now, if the stems are very tender and young, you can chop them up. If they're woody, you need to remove the stem from the woody part from your leaves. And then you just start chopping it up, and you can use it fresh. And primarily when you're using rosemary, Julie, don't just dump it in your recipe. You really want to put it in like with your liquid or with oil or butter. That way it moistens your rosemary and it helps add flavor throughout your entire dish.
And rosemary is one of the ones herbs, as I remember, that has more oil than some of the things. So the liquid would help release some of that oil into your foods.
Right, and also, Julie, if you're using dried rosemary, you've got to keep in mind that dried rosemary is 2 to 3 times stronger than fresh rosemary. So if a recipe calls for fresh rosemary and all you have is dried, you need to use 2 to 3 times less rosemary. And also with your dried rosemary, it is a more brittle texture than your fresh rosemary. So that's where it's really important to add your dried rosemary to your liquids and to your butters and your oils, because that way it moistens the rosemary up.
So probably start with 1/3 of amount,
right.
And then if it needs more, add it, since it's so much harder to take stuff out
yeah,
than
you
to
can't
add
take
it
it away.
So what are some other things? Actually, one of my favorite ways to have rosemary is with vegetables. I just love to toss fresh potatoes with a little bit of olive oil and rosemary and roast them.
That's my favorite way, is to roast the vegetables. You can take any vegetable that you like, whether it be potatoes. Potatoes are my favorite with rosemary, but also carrots are very good, your broccoli, your cauliflower, or your parsnips, your rutabagas, or a mixture of all of these, and chop them up into cubes, drizzle them lightly with your olive oil, and then just sprinkle a little rosemary on there, or also you can mix your rosemary and your garlic. These two complement each other, and then just roast them in basically a 450-degree oven.
Right. Yes. There's nothing better than garlic, too, on potatoes.
And it smells your kitchen up. The aroma in your kitchen, you know, is phenomenal. And also, you know, Julie, you can use rosemary other than cooking, too.
What ways?
Well, this slide will show you it's aromatic, so you can use it to scent your rooms, put fragrance in your cars. You can use it for cosmetics. It's wonderful for rinse for brunettes, to bring out that brunette flavor and the brunette color and those red highlights. Of course, we talked about culinary. You can decorate with it. You can take the rosemary here and weave it together and make a wreath. Then put some lavender in it, or sage, or mint, or whatever. And then it also is used for medicinal purposes.
What kind of medicinal remedies are there for it?
Well, basically, we really don't get into teaching the medicinal, but if they really want to get into medicinal, they can go and buy the Rodale's Encyclopedia of Herbs for Medicinal Medicines.
Right, when you're talking about decorations, I've seen them at Christmas time for the holidays that they'll make them into topiaries and shape them like little Christmas trees. So you could give one for a gift in the holidays, and then the person you give it to could put it outside and enjoy rosemary all year round.
Right, and that's one thing about rosemary. You can take the rosemary, and it's primarily used for the topiaries, and just start trimming it into the shapes. But then the sad part about it is that does require a little more work because you have to keep trimming it to keep the plant to keep that shape too.
Well, also on rosemary, as I remember, you wanted the best part for cooking are the
Yes.
ends, so I guess trimming to keep it in shape works pretty well too.
Well, yeah, you really want this really tender end here, Julie, because when it starts getting woodier, this is when you can use that part too. And as you see in this slide, every part of rosemary is usable, is edible almost. The flowers, you can use those for garnishing or cooking, chopping them up. The leaves here, we crush them, we mince them, we use them in our foods. We can also use them as a garnish. But then the stems, they are not edible. But we can take the stems and put vegetables or meat or vegetables and meat combined and have kebabs. But when you do this, you need to take this woody stem. You need to soak it for at least an hour in water. Then put your vegetables on it, and then you can grill it. Because if you don't, this will catch a fire, and then you're going to have issues.
That would be some bad issues, yes.
And you can also take these stems, and if you have your charcoal grills, the last 5 to 10 minutes of cooking, you can just throw those rosemary stems on the coals. And I had a lady tell me the other day that she had even tried this on her gas grill, and I about went into panic mode. She said, but I didn't, throw them on the gas grill. She took a little pan of water and put some aluminum foil in there and kind of made like a vent, and she put her rosemary stems in the water as it was cooking and kind of, smoked it that way.
Interesting.
So that was interesting.
Well, are there any other foods we mentioned that we forgot to mention that rosemary goes well with? We mentioned meats and root vegetables.
Your eggs, your cheeses, your peas, your soups. It's wonderful in soups. And your lentils. It's really good in your lentils because it adds a flavor to the lentils like you've never had before in your soups. In barbecuing, it's really good in your sauces, in your cream sauces. And also in barbecuing, you can take 3 or 4 different little sprigs here and tie them together, and then take and brush your barbecue sauce on and add a little rosemary flavor with that too.
Well, that's a pretty cool idea. So if we don't have any rosemary, are there any other herbs that we can substitute with it?
Yes, there is, and that's what's really neat. If you do not have rosemary, all you need to do is take mint, the mint, and then use either a pinch of ginger or a pinch of sage. Now, don't do both, but mint and a pinch of ginger or mint and a pinch of sage, and that will substitute for the rosemary.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Martha.